Hey there, what have you been doing for the past 2 years? If you're like most, you've been sitting around, not able to go anywhere or do anything. In other words, you've been training for the KSJE Zero Mile Fun Run. That's right, KSJE's Zero Mile Fun Run is back and it's better than ever. Join us at 10:30 Saturday morning, May 21st at San Juan College Learning Commons Plaza. Get your t-shirt now for $15 and support KSJE. Find out more at ksje.com/funrun.
Hello, I'm Antonia Gonzalez with National Native News. Tune in to our headline news service for stories about indigenous communities across the country and around the world. Hear about top concerns facing Native nations. Tribal history, language, and culture is also part of Indigenous life. Check out our headline news service to learn more. Tune in here for National Native News.
Weekdays at 5:55 on KSJE Farmington. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, a community-owned and operated hospital. Here for you when you need us. From emergency care to routine checkups and screenings, caregivers are here and ready to provide the safe, high-quality care you need close to home. Online at sanjuanregional.com with the latest health information and resources to help you live life better here. "11 minutes past 8 o'clock. It is the 5th day of May, 2022. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin, and thanks for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM over the air, of course, here in San Juan County, New Mexico. Everywhere else on the planet, you can always listen at ksje.com, and we welcome our viewers who are watching our visual radio program this morning. The video is streaming live this morning out to the KSJE YouTube channel and our Twitter account. It'll be posted on Facebook very shortly. Thanks for joining us this morning, everyone, because coming up, it's our monthly conversation with local archaeologist Paul Reed. He'll be joining me in the next few moments, so we hope you'll stay tuned for that. Then coming up later on this hour, I'll be speaking with Donnie Ortiz about a new opportunity for folks who want to become licensed teachers. A great opportunity to get some education and get some salary while you're doing that. A lot of great programs available. This is one of the newer ones. We'll talk more about that later on this morning at 8:45 on KSJE. So we hope you will stay tuned for that, everybody. Next hour, Mick Hess will take us roving with the arts. All week, Mick has been profiling the Prayer for the Ukraine, that great composition. So we'll hear more about that coming up today, 9:06 on Roving with the Arts on KSJE. Don't forget, we invite you to connect with us on our social media platforms, which include Facebook and YouTube, our 2 Twitter accounts, and our Instagram page. And if you're a podcast person, you can subscribe for free wherever you listen to podcasts and maybe discover a new program, a new topic from KSJE that you haven't heard before. You can find us on iTunes and Spotify, iHeartRadio and Google Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and much, much more. Just search and check us out and subscribe for free. Outside our studios, it is a cool morning this morning here in San Juan County and everywhere in New Mexico, it seems. 41 degrees is our current temperature here in Farmington. Lots of sunshine. That's the forecast for today. Winds will be calmer, which is good. Today's high 73 in Farmington by this afternoon. Another cool night tonight with a low of 41. Tomorrow warmer with a high of 83. On Friday with lots of sunshine, 48 for an overnight low. The winds are forecast to pick up again Saturday, Sunday, and Monday as we get highs again. 84 on Saturday, 79 on Sunday, 78 on Monday, and overnight lows from near 60 to right around 50 degrees. Well, let me introduce my guest who is back with us this morning for his regular visit, which we're so glad about. Paul Reed is joining us from his home. Good morning, Paul. Good to see you.
Good morning, Scott. Great to be back on with you.
Thank you for being here, as always, of course. And so our topic is a one we've been talking about for quite a while, but of course it's a big deal and it's an important topic, and that, of course, is Chaco Canyon. There are some protections being proposed from the BLM, correct, to kind of protect some of the land around Chaco Canyon outside of the boundaries of the park, of course, to protect that land from development, at least on BLM land. Is that still the situation?
Right, that's correct. BLM is proposing to withdraw about 351,000 acres of land from oil and gas development on the federal surface around Chaco in roughly a 10-mile zone.
Got you. And you and Archaeology Southwest and others have been working with local Native American leaders from tribes and pueblos in the region to kind of get their input into this decision and just what Chaco Canyon means to those peoples as well. And you've learned, it seems to me, you've learned quite a bit, and I've learned quite a bit by extension from talking with you, kind of about just how sacred this spot is to folks that maybe we haven't really connected to that area before.
That's right, Scott. So we've been in this, kind of working as an interested party with BLM since 2014, and with BIA jumping into the process of planning, how this area is going to look over the next 15, 20 years. So one of the most rewarding things for me, and I think really valuable for the planning process, has been connecting with different tribal groups in the area and really trying to get those voices back into this equation. So, the way the government manages land for decades has not typically involved, a lot of consultation with tribes. And I think the agencies have been working harder to do that. But as an interested party with concerns about cultural resources, sacred sites, we've worked really hard to partner with groups like the El Pueblo Council of Governors, which is the 19 New Mexico Pueblos, plus Isleta del Sur and El Paso, and with other tribes to make sure they have seats at the table as we consider things. And so that's been a real priority for our work.
Right. And you all have produced a video that I want to share here in a few minutes, but maybe give us some background as to kind of how that all got started, because it seems to be there's quite a consensus among these different tribes and pueblos about the need to protect Chaco. Maybe the specifics are still maybe being discussed, but it seems like there's a pretty good consensus about needing to protect this space.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think that, even with some of the debate about size of the zone, et cetera, I don't think there's too many people in the country, certainly not anyone in the indigenous community, who doesn't feel like Chaco Canyon is a very important sacred place going back thousands of years. So what we set out to do was to create a film that would elevate the voices of indigenous folks, of Native American tribes who are concerned about Chaco, and in particular Pueblo groups who, lived in Chaco many centuries ago, but whose migrations took them out of the region to places, as far away as Hopi in Arizona, up and down the Rio Grande, down to the south at Acoma and Zuni, and other places. And we felt like putting together a film that highlighted the importance of Chaco and had indigenous leaders speaking in their own voices and in their own languages, for parts of this film, was really going to be a great way to highlight just how important Chaco is and how important it is that we protect this amazing UNESCO World Heritage Site from oil and gas development. And as we've talked, Scott, this is not about a plus or minus or a binary oil and gas development, no oil and gas development. It's about protecting the places that matter universally to everyone and are particularly important to our indigenous friends and colleagues.
Right. And I was surprised to hear in the video, Paul Reed, that one of the speakers was saying that, their voice isn't that strong. And so, and I was surprised to hear that, because they are a pueblo and a sovereign entity, and yet when it comes to maybe talking about these public issues, they didn't feel that their voice was very strong or influential, and so that was a little disappointing to me. But let's take a look at the video, and folks can hear this and see it, and hear these folks in their own words, and kind of the area that we're talking about here. So let's take a look again, courtesy of Archaeology Southwest here on KSJE.
Look ya kwa le na hesota kwa yu hetam me kitab ishon nawan is meli kitab kwa le awit tele no na kwa hon awa yu hetun apshuka akya hon le na awit telnan hon kwa yam look ya. This place had different people here. They helped each other raise the children. They helped each other with the buildings. Just looking at the walls of what's here, 4, 5, 6-story high buildings. For it to be still standing, the commitment to the community as a whole is the love for each other and wanting to make sure that people survived with the means that they had the best they could. That community involvement is the main concept of what the Puebloan people are today. Think of others before you think of yourself.
Chaco is one of the most important developments that happened in North America through time. So that by about 1100, Chaco had 5,000 to 8,000 people in the canyon, and in this area surrounding perhaps 25,000, 30,000 people. We're talking about a large group of organized people spread across a landscape. Our group and others have worked for almost a decade now to try to protect Chaco Canyon from the encroaching oil and gas development, which has in recent years crept closer and closer to the boundary of the national park. And as this has happened, individual sites have in many cases been protected, but then they develop wells and other oil and gas infrastructure all the way around these. So essentially this larger landscape has gotten compromised. And as I've worked with tribes over the last 10 years, it's become more and more clear to me just how important this landscape is to the groups who are descended from the people who built Chaco Canyon 1,000 years ago.
This place, to us as Hopi, is not known as Chaco. It's known as Yupkovi. To Hopi, this is a place where we all gathered. This here is our motherland.
We hold these areas deep in our hearts because we would like to pass it on to our unborn.
Our history is not written, it's taught orally.
Passed from generation to generation. Some of the ceremonies that we did here are still being practiced today. So it's up to us, the people, to retain the importance of the language.
So now
Ada di nikemani hostan kan liedgat.
Pena wappa ne nawe akya laatte holomasi luala usuna temlo nawa yu heto now.
To retain the songs of what related to here.
When you extract anything from beneath you, is it still solid ground? If it's not, it's just a matter of time before it caves in. And that's our worry. Places like this, they're irreplaceable. Once they're gone forever.
So the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of Interior are going through a process to consider withdrawing 351,000 acres of land in a 10-mile zone roughly around Chaco Canyon from oil and gas leasing.
If it was possible for us as indigenous people to protect this place, it would have been done a long time ago. Our voices aren't that powerful, so we have to rely on the federal government to help us with protection.
Within the 10-mile zones around Chaco Canyon, there are 4,200 known archaeological sites. This area has only been surveyed at about a 15% level. So as much as this is about buffering Chaco Canyon and protecting it from oil and gas, the resources in this zone specifically are incredibly important in their own right.
The Navajo Nation government and Navajo Latis are not in favor of 10 miles of ancestral protections. This is devastating to the Navajo community members here who are suffering from short-term and long-term illnesses related to oil and gas pollutions.
It's very important that the 19 pueblos come together. These landscapes have the connection to our continuation of who we are as Pueblo people. And it's all embedded in our songs, our prayers, of the importance of this place.
There is oil and gas drillings at the footsteps of the ancestral homes.
To us, the people are still here. We're here to help them, to look over them because of the natural materials that are still present in this landscape.
Their thoughts and prayers within you, and a feeling of strength and resolve to protect this place from people who want to destroy it.
That is the video that was produced by Archaeology Southwest about protecting the area around Chaco Canyon. Paul Reed, of course, with Archaeology Southwest is my guest this morning. And Paul, again, just to be clear, the area that we're talking about is outside the park boundaries of Chaco Canyon. And again, this is just the BLM federal surface and subsurface lands that we are talking about, at least as part of this current discussion of protection, correct? Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So, and so again, we've got several different types of land in this checkerboard area, and so I just want to be clear that this is what we're talking about. That this is the BLM land in this area, in this zone, right? This 10-mile zone.
Right, that's correct. This is, again, roughly about 351,000 acres of BLM federal managed surface in this area.
Right. And then the state of New Mexico has already withdrawn its state lands in this region. And so then that would just leave Navajo tribal allotments and things like that?
Right. Most of what would remain is Navajo individual allotments. So parcels of land that are held by usually dozens, in some cases even over 100 individuals, who've been added to allotments through time. And, that's where, if this goes through, that would be where oil and gas companies would go if they wanted to continue to lease around Chaco. Now, the interesting thing from my perspective in this 10-mile zone around Chaco is, as we get closer to Chaco, it actually becomes more difficult and more costly to extract the oil and gas from the Manco Shale formation because there's a lot more water in it. It takes a lot more processing. So we're really not even talking about the best lands, the best subsurface deposits by any means to do oil and gas development in New Mexico and certainly in the Chaco region. So, I think that we can really look at this less as a loss of potentially leasable lands for industry and more as just an opportunity to protect a place that is really unlike any other on the entire planet. So I think that the need to protect Chaco, to listen to our indigenous colleagues, and as Rayon Francisco said in the last bit in the film, to protect people living on the land who've already been suffering from the effects of oil and gas development.
Sure, of course. And but again, there is some disagreement in the Navajo Nation, right, about that. Is it 5 miles? Is it 10 miles? What should that distance be? And that's currently being discussed at that tribal level, right?
That's right. The Navajo Nation has come out and said that their preference is for a 5 mile zone of protection. My concern with that is, having spent, more than 35 years at this point in and around different parts of Chaco, and having spent a good chunk of sort of the COVID year of 2020 out working in that zone, we have very significant resources between 5 and 10 miles outside Chaco. So, as I mentioned in the film, this is in part about protecting Chaco, but it's also about protecting the resources that lie in this very special zone that is next to Chaco Canyon. And at 5 miles of protection, we're going to have a whole lot of resources outside that zone that are still subject to very many impacts. So, we feel like 10 miles is actually a compromise in the first place. Other groups that we've talked to from the beginning, we're talking about perhaps 20, et cetera, maybe even 25. So I think it's important that our listeners understand that 10 miles is something that's been talked about now since late 2015. There's been a whole lot of discussion about it with a whole lot of different folks. So I think this has been very well vetted in the public sphere.
Got it. And in the film, if I heard it correctly, it was stated, I think you said it, that there's only been about maybe 15% of that area around Chaco that's been kind of surveyed and found these hundreds of thousands of potential sites, correct, in this area. Did I understand that correctly? Right.
We're at about a 15% archaeological survey level, and at this point in the database, there's about 4,200 sites. Now, the interesting part of that for me is, we don't know about special places, traditional cultural places, sacred sites for tribes. The Navajo Nation has done some ethnographic work over the years, but the study that we did with Acoma in 2018 and some work on Navajo Gallup over the last decade or so, these are really the only ethnographically focused projects that have been done in the area until, fortunately, the last year or so. Department of Interior in late 2019 fund two different projects, one for Navajo Nation and one for a coalition of Pueblos that's taken the name of the Chaco Heritage Tribal Association. Both of these efforts are ongoing in and around Greater Chaco and some other areas beyond that boundary. And I think when we get to the end of that process, perhaps later this year or early in 2023, we're going to have a lot more information about how different indigenous groups have connected to Chaco through time. And what this is going to do for us is it's going to go well beyond sort of, Western style archaeology, where we're looking for physical remains and we're going through the process that archaeologists like me, are hopefully very competent at. What our tribal partners are adding to this, though, is connections to landscape, to sacred points that might not have the same set of physical remains that archaeologists are going to map onto. So I think we're going to learn a lot more about that, and I think this is going to be a much stronger tool for the BLM, for BIA, for Navajo Nation, for other land managers to be able to say, here are areas that are very important to indigenous groups, and we need to think about other ways to protect them. In the archaeological world, and I mentioned this in the film, we identify a site, we put some kind of a buffer zone around that individual site, and then allow, oil and gas infrastructure, a road, a pipeline, storage tanks, an actual oil and gas well to go in. But those pieces of the landscape then become compromised through time. So one of the things that I think we're going to see out of the tribally focused work is larger pieces of the landscape, perhaps set aside in this 10-mile zone, maybe outside, because those landscapes are what's important as they connect the smaller dots, if you will. So I think this landscape approach is something that, is challenging for the agencies. I've looked into this, and there aren't really too many federal agencies in the West that are managing the landscape at this level. But this is something that the National Historic Preservation Act talks about. It's something that the National Environmental Policy Act talks about. NEPA. We need to think about landscapes when we're thinking about, how to balance development. And I think we're heading in the right direction there.
Got it. But I would think, again, from just extrapolation, right, that if it's only been 15% surveyed, as you survey more and more, isn't the obvious conclusion that you're going to find many more of these sites, and so that number will increase? You've already got over 4,000, right? And so that's going to get larger the more that you survey, ideally?
Right. I mean, if we did just the simple math, which, may not catch everything, we've got about 15%. That's roughly, 1/6. We multiply by 6, we could end up with 25,000 additional cultural sites in this area that,
right,
need some kind of management, some kind of special consideration. We add in tribally focused TCPs, sacred sites that may not be as visible archaeologically. And this is a very rich and important zone, and that really is the underlying philosophy for why we need to protect the 10-mile zone. So again,
right,
getting well past the notion of putting a buffer or some kind of a wall around Chaco. I've heard some discussion of that out in the media and in some groups, and it really is much more complicated than that. And it's a different, more comprehensive issue that we're talking about.
Right. And to be clear, there are protections, right, of from oil and gas development at a actual site. I mean, they just can't drill through ruins or those types of things, right? They have to move their process if they're licensed in that area, right? And they find something as they're exploring, as they're surveying that site, right? There are protections in place.
Yeah. A company will get a lease, they'll buy that lease, and then they'll go in and actually stake out individual locations for oil and gas wells, for roads, for pipelines. And then those will go through a process with an archaeologist examining the area to be sure there aren't impacts. They'll do a threatened and endangered survey to meet the requirements of NEPA. So there are protections in place. The point that we make is over time, we end up with these archaeological sites and perhaps, stretches of the environment that need protection as islands as the industrial development continues all around them. And what we've learned is that compromises the values of those places. If we have we have a building on us that's protected, like a Chacoan site, but we have an oil and gas well 300 feet away, we haven't really protected the setting, the landscape, and the association, and really for tribal members, the feeling and sort of the emotional effects that they have from connecting to these landscapes. So it really is about elevating the values of our Indigenous colleagues and partners and having those work their way in. And this is part of the federal legislation. I've heard from some folks that this would require some kind of congressional action or a presidential executive order. And we actually are required under the National Historic Preservation Act to identify all cultural resources that may be potentially eligible to the National Register of these places. And if those might be affected, then the agencies have to develop a plan to mitigate those impacts. And to this point, I think we've really missed out on the identification part of that process because we haven't had Indigenous partners on the landscape saying this area is important to us. You archaeologists might not see it the way we do, but it is very important. So let's put that into consideration before we allow some of these developments. So, this isn't about going back and trying to fix something that, we perceived to be wrong 40 years ago as development ramped up, but it's about trying to be smarter as we manage this landscape moving forward.
Got it. You mentioned earlier, too, about, that the oil and gas in this particular area is not maybe of the best quality, right, for development and things along that line. I guess the only problem is as the price is higher now, that even some of the less desirable areas become more desirable because the price is now higher, and so you can get a lot more for that even lower quality oil and gas, I guess, than you could when gas was maybe, $3 a therm or whatever the price is going for, right?
Right. The market forces are definitely a factor here, and it's not something that we ignore as we're thinking about this from our side. But again, we circle back to Chaco Canyon as one of only about 25 World Heritage Sites in the entire country. We think about how important it is to the ancestral tribes that live around it, and really to Americans across all spheres and walks of life. We don't need to put such an important site at risk to just put a few more dollars into folks' pockets. So that's our perspective.
Sure. Understood. And so we just have a couple of minutes remaining this morning, Paul Reed. I know the deadline to comment about the BLM's proposal is tomorrow. So whether folks have whatever they want to say, pro, con, whatever, this is the time to say it.
Right. And we have great information on our website. If you just do archaeologysouthwest.org and do a search on Chaco, how to comment on BLM land withdrawal process, it'll pop right up. The film is available on YouTube with a simple Protecting Chaco Canyon, search, put that in, it'll come right up. Our partners have good information. We're sending folks to a portal called protectchaco.org. There's an opportunity there to put your comments in, click send, and it'll go directly to BLM, place, the BLM online collection point. And, then the voices are heard. They'll go through the process. They'll compile comments, and then they're going to go through an extended review process for the rest of this year, is what I understand. And then at some point next year, announce, whatever the culmination of this process.
Sure. And you said, and the film said, I think, too, that if they do decide to do this buffer or this exclusion zone or what we're calling it, that would be in effect for 20 years or so.
Right. They're looking at putting this in place for 20 years. This, of course, is subject to additional federal action and the like. We are hoping and expecting to have a congressional bill introduced that would do a similar thing and would provide more permanent protection for this area. And again, this isn't going to exclude oil and gas development. It's not going to change anything for anyone living in the 10-mile zone right now. This is simply going to protect many of the, an additional group of resources that many of us really across the spectrum are very concerned about.
Right. And this new, I call it new, but maybe I'm mistaken, might be cooperative effort among the tribes and pueblos. Is this new, or have the tribes and pueblos been kind of talking about this for a long time and we're just maybe now noticing it or hearing it with a louder voice or whatever the case may be?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. So the group that the Pueblos belong to is the All Pueblo Council of Governors,
Right.
the 19 New Mexico Pueblos, plus Isla del Sur. Hopi cooperates with that group in different ways. But the effort on the Chaco Heritage Tribal Association to do this focused ethnographic work comes out of a specific appropriation in late 2019. But I do think that we're going to see more and more of these cooperative efforts to, have Pueblo people, at least on the one hand, really have an active voice in managing these sites, which are, their ancestral sites. And I think they're very willing to partner with the Navajo Nation and figure out the best way to do these things. But, they feel like even though they've left the area on the migrations that happened decades and centuries ago, that these are still important lands and that their voices matter. And, as Octavia said in the video, which you mentioned, their voices aren't as strong as they need to be to protect these places. So they lobby the federal government, and groups like us try to elevate those voices as well.
Right. Well, and again, as as we have heard and as you have said, if they are speaking with a united voice, I think those voices are stronger and louder, and that can make a difference, which I think is what we are seeing in that video, and also around the country these days. So that's something to be noted as well. Paul Reed, we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come on with you, Scott, and to do this little viewing of our film. Again, folks can find it on YouTube. If they're interested in an extended viewing, looking at it, we have great information on our website. And yeah, please, folks, get your voices in. Make your comments by tomorrow, 5 p.m. our time.
Very true. Well, and again, I was excited to see a lot of folks in the film, our guests that you brought with you onto this program. And so those are all archived on YouTube and Facebook, and folks can check out longer conversations with these guests and their perspectives that you've been able to provide to our audiences, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Paul Reed.
Well, thank you, Scott. Great to be on with you.
You bet. Good to see you. We'll see you again next month.
Sounds great.
Stay warm. It's chilly these days. Thank you. That's Paul Reed from Archaeology Southwest, my guest this morning here on KSJE. KSJE is supported by the Farmington Civic Center, bringing a full slate of entertainment to Farmington and San Juan County. The Interactive Art of Artrageous, Saturday, May 21st at 7:30 p.m. The Farmington Civic Center, 200 West Arrington in downtown Farmington. Find out more online at fmtn.org/shows or 505-599-1148. KSJE and San Juan College present the Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week. Week 15, Don't Cram. While it may seem like a good idea to learn an entire semester's worth of information in one night, it's not an effective study habit, and it can cause a lot of unnecessary stress. Instead, study a little bit of information every day for at least 20 to 30 minutes. You'll likely remember more later, and you'll feel calm and prepared when it comes to exam time. The Student Success Coaching Tip of the Week, presented by KSJE and the Student Achievement Center at San Juan College.